Look, imagine a force in the sporting world so relentless, so completely innovative, that it literally rewrites the laws of a global game. We're talking about a mastermind who doesn't just win trophies, but fundamentally alters the way we even perceive space, time, and movement on a football pitch. Over 30 major trophies across 3 completely different nations. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are diving deep, and I mean deep, into the mind of an absolute visionary. We're going to unpack the cinematic journey, the tactical obsessions, and the unparalleled global influence of the man who completely rewired the very DNA of world football. Of course, I'm talking about Joseph Pep Guardiola. So right off the bat, it leaves us with one monumental question, right? How did one man change football forever? I mean, it's easy to look at the medals and the accolades, but to truly understand Guardiola's legacy, we actually have to look way past the silverware. We have to look at the blueprint. In this explainer, we aren't just celebrating a manager, we're dissecting a full-blown tactical revolution. We're going to explore the sheer audacity of a man who looked at the traditional rules of a century-old game and just decided they were wrong. He replaced physical brawn with absolute, suffocating cerebral dominance. Now, to really appreciate this revolution, we have to understand exactly what he was up against. Historically, massive success in football was often built on strictly defensive, rigid styles. Think of the Catenaccio-inspired systems employed so effectively by legendary managers like Jose Mourinho or Diego Simeone. You know the type. These systems rely on sheer grit, low blocks, absorbing endless pressure and grinding out those brutal 1-0 victories with barely 40% possession. It's trench warfare. Contrast that visceral defensive image with Guardiola's absolute obsession with dizzying geometry and fluid attacking movement. His teams routinely hold 70% of the ball. It's like a completely different sport. As the great Philip Lahm perfectly described it, Guardiola's tactics were an offensive sake, prioritizing lightning-quick recoveries and suffocating ball retention over ever just sitting back. Section 1. The tiki-taka myth. Let's get into it. Okay, because what you think you know about Pep Guardiola's defining style is likely a complete illusion. Seriously, let's shatter that right now. Listen to this direct quote from the man himself. "I hate tiki-taka. It's rubbish and completely pointless." No way, right? Yes, the very man credited by the global media as the architect of tiki-taka absolutely loathed the term. As he explained, he despises passing just for the sake of passing. For Guardiola, recycling possession is actually a defensive mechanism to deprive the opponent of the ball. But when moving into the attacking third, every single pass must have a lethal, calculated intention. It's about moving the ball to rapidly displace the opponent and score, not just passing around to look pretty for the cameras. So if it isn't tiki-taka, what is his actual framework? Well, Dominic Turrent, who was Guardiola's assistant for a decade, broke down Pep's true philosophy into 3 simple, completely devastating pillars. Pillar 1, play the ball out from the back to purposefully draw the opponent in. Pillar 2, pass and move to brutally exploit the exact space they just left behind. And Pillar 3, press high to win the ball back instantly. It just creates this suffocating loop of total control. This is exactly what birthed the famous 6-second rule back at Barcelona, where his players were tasked with winning the ball back within exactly 6 seconds of losing it, or they had to commit a tactical foul. It's total athletic and mental dominance, all the time. Section 2. Origins of a mastermind. You have to wonder, where does a genius actually learn his trade? First, he was deeply influenced as a player under the legendary Johan Cruyff, absorbing all those fluid, positional principles of total football. But his restless mind just didn't stop there. Later in his playing career, he actually spent time in Mexico specifically to learn from his friend Juan Manuel Lillo. But perhaps the absolute most cinematic moment of his education, that was traveling all the way to Argentina to seek out the intense tactical mentorship of Marcelo Bielsa. Picture this. The 2 men famously debated tactical theory for 11 straight hours over a backyard barbecue. They were literally using salt and pepper shakers to map out formations. Pep was essentially traveling the globe, collecting the world's most potent tactical philosophies so he could synthesize them into his own master plan. But, this philosophy was also born out of intense personal necessity. Back during his own playing days in the 1990s, an era that was completely dominated by hulking, physical midfielders like Roy Keane and Patrick Vieira, Guardiola wasn't the fastest guy on the pitch. He certainly wasn't the strongest. He was this fragile but brilliant, deep-lying playmaker. He thrived by dictating the tempo and the rhythm of the game from the base of midfield. This personal experience forged his absolute core belief: the brain is always, always faster than the legs. It's a belief that would go on to inspire an entire generation of diminutive Spanish playmakers, guys like Xavi and Andres Iniesta. He proved you definitely didn't need to be a physical giant to conquer the world. Section 3. The Blueprint for Conquering Europe. Now this is where all that beautiful theory transforms into cold, hard, indisputable hardware. Get a load of this. Guardiola holds the staggering record for the most consecutive league games won in Spain's La Liga with 16 wins. In Germany's Bundesliga, he hit 19 wins. And in England's notoriously tough Premier League, 18 consecutive wins. So why is this statistically mind-blowing? Because he didn't just win, he literally broke the mathematical will of 3 entirely different leagues. It absolutely proves that his methods aren't some cultural fluke, they are universally dominant, infinitely adaptable, and practically unstoppable no matter the country, the climate, or the opposition. And the crazy thing is, he achieved this global dominance through restless, obsessive reinvention. Look at the progression. At Barcelona, he perfected the 4-3-3 to perfectly exploit Spain's highly technical style. Then he goes to Bayern Munich, facing these lethal German counterattacks. And he experiments wildly, often using a 3-4-3 for absolute transition control. Then at Manchester City, dealing with the sheer physicality of the Premier League, he actually resurrects and modernizes the 1920s WM formation, turning it into a 3-2-2-3. Conceptually, this creates a massive box in the midfield. He overwhelms the opponent's center by simply outnumbering them where it counts the most. He is constantly shifting his geometry on the pitch to stay one step ahead of European defenses who are desperately trying to figure him out. Section 4. Weapons of Mass Domination. Okay, to overcome these rigid backlines, Guardiola forged highly specific, totally unorthodox roles for his players. First up, the false nine. Think back to that legendary 6-2 demolition of Real Madrid at the Bernabeu in 2009. Guardiola took a young Lionel Messi and deployed him in this bizarrely unorthodox role, telling him to drop super deep into the center of midfield. The sheer shock on the pitch was palpable. Real Madrid's towering center backs were literally paralyzed. They had to make a choice. They either stepped up to follow Messi, which left massive gaps behind them for Barcelona's wingers to exploit, or they stayed put, watching helplessly as Messi orchestrated a devastating 4-versus-3 numerical overload right in the middle of the pitch. It was absolute tactical checkmate. Next up, the sweeper keeper. As high pressing became a huge global trend to try and combat his possession style, Guardiola just counteracted it by treating his goalkeepers as deep-lying playmakers. Players like Manuel Neuer and Ederson were tasked with rushing off their lines, sure, to sweep up danger, but more importantly, to play pinpoint passes under immense pressure. At Man City, Ederson's ability to routinely hit a 70-yard, deadly accurate long ball completely takes 11 opposing players out of the equation with a single swing of his boot. This forces opposition defenses into a terrified retreat, which, you guessed it, in turn, creates the very midfield space Guardiola craves in the first place. Then we have the radical concept of the inverted fullback. Traditionally, fullbacks just hug the touchline and overlap, right? Well, Guardiola looked at elite players like Philipp Lahm or João Cancelo and decided, no, I'm going to pull them inside into the central midfield when we have the ball. Think of it mathematically. By doing this, he creates a permanent 3-versus-2 or 4-versus-3 numerical superiority right in the center of the park. His teams can literally always find an open man. It completely reshapes the geometry of the pitch, stifling counterattacks before they can even breathe. And most recently, he unleashed yet another masterstroke, the libero hybrid. During Manchester City's treble-winning season, Guardiola deployed center-back John Stones in a hybrid role. Stones went from being a heavily criticized traditional defender to looking like a majestic midfield orchestrator in a Champions League final. He was stepping up into midfield to both create and defend, evolving the old 1970s libero role with just a perfect balance of defensive grit and elite ball progression. It proves that even a decade and a half into his managerial career, Pep is still manipulating space in ways no one else even sees. Section 5. The Science of Domination. So, how does it feel to play against this? Well, the sheer frustration of Guardiola's opponents is palpable. Legendary Italian defender Giorgio Chiellini famously and quite dramatically stated, "Guardiolismo has ruined a generation of defenders." What he meant was that Guardiola's absolute insistence on playing out from the back has triggered this massive global ripple effect. 8-year-olds in youth academies in rural England or Italy are no longer taught to just tackle and indiscriminately clear the ball into row Z. No way. They are now required to be elite passers who can operate under immense, high-stakes pressure. Guardiola literally changed the global standard of the sport from the ground up, forcing everyone else to adapt or perish. And the ultimate proof of this philosophy comes down to one staggering number: 2.
Pep Guardiola is one of only 2 managers in the entire history of the sport to win the elusive continental treble. That means winning the domestic league, the domestic cup, and the Champions League in a single season. And he did it twice. Doing it once is legendary. Doing it twice, 14 years apart, in 2 completely different eras of football, first with Barcelona in 2009 and then with Manchester City in 2023, proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that his methods are practically impervious to time.
But what's truly fascinating, and maybe a little surprising, is that this tactical genius transcends the sport of soccer entirely. Did you know elite rugby union coach Eddie Jones explicitly cited Guardiola as an inspiration for his own tactical approaches? It's true. Jones studied Pep to understand how to find space and create numerical advantages in microscopic, tight areas of the field. Let's be real, when international rugby coaches are using your soccer concepts on spacing and movement to go out and win World Cup matches, you know for sure you have cracked a fundamental code of human geometry in team sports.
Section 6. A global football legacy. Today, you literally cannot watch a top-level match without seeing his fingerprints all over it. He has cultivated this vast coaching tree of elite managers whose approaches were heavily shaped or directly inspired by his teachings. We're talking Thomas Tuchel, Luis Enrique, even his actual former players and assistants like Mikel Arteta at Arsenal and Xavi at Barcelona, who took these exact blueprints right to rival top clubs. His philosophy is now so deeply embedded in the DNA of modern football that even when Guardiola is not on the touchline, a version of his brain is almost certainly managing the opposition. Of course, he hasn't gone completely unchallenged. The modern era of football is defined by an epic tactical rivalry. On one side, you have Guardiola's symphonic, controlled, methodical, Catalan-educated positional play. And on the other side, the heavy metal, chaotic, lightning-fast German gegenpressing, championed by managers like Jurgen Klopp. But the beautiful irony of this rivalry is how they basically forced each other to evolve. Tactical observers note that Guardiola has actually absorbed elements of Klopp's chaos over the years, making his own pressing traps even deadlier. It's just a breathtaking, endless tactical arms race.
So, given the sheer scale of his impact, transforming formations, completely rewriting player roles, and fundamentally altering the mathematical philosophy of how to win a football match, it begs the question, will football ever see another tactical revolution quite like this? Or has Josep Guardiola simply pushed the beautiful game to its absolute theoretical limit? Food for thought. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and I'll see you next time.